Daniel Hoffman, former CIA station chief, Fox News contributor. And Dan, good morning to you.
Good morning.
A few direct and straightforward questions. First, why pull back last night, Dan?
Well, the Trump administration imposed maximum economic sanctions on Iran to drive them back to the bargaining table so that we could fix that very flawed nuclear deal which the Obama administration negotiated. And what is possible, if I were to engage in a little bit of speculation, is that the administration was prepared to launch a retaliatory strike last night, but that they might have wanted to give Iran one last opportunity to come back to the negotiating table before doing so. Now, whether we looked at a back channel with Iran, which we've done in the past, to start those negotiations or make it clear that we're ready, the president has stated so publicly. Maybe we took some other action last night to pull us back from the brink before we launched our own kinetic action.
Okay, Dan, I'm just looking at the Twitter feed here, and the president is firing off at least two, maybe three of these. Let me digest these in a moment, but we'll continue our discussion here. If the future possibility for a strike has not been ruled out, which I think you would agree with, what could or what would be the targets, do you believe?
Right, I think, so let's be clear, we haven't struck yet, but we absolutely can. If we were not to strike, that would also deliver a very serious message, I think, to Iran and other enemies we face around the world. As far as the strike that we might be looking at targets, missile sites, radar batteries, which Iran's IRGC, their Revolutionary Guard Corps, which launched the attack on our RQ-4 drone, we would hit those sites as a proportional response. I think that would probably make the most sense.
Okay.
It doesn't mean that Iran wouldn't themselves then retaliate, but that would be a flexible, proportional response.
I'm going to read 4 tweets in a moment here, but just one more question on this. If we don't hit back, how does Iran take that? How do they react?
Well, Iran has been gradually escalating their nuclear blackmail threats. Remember, on May 8th, they threatened to enrich uranium to weapons-grade levels if they didn't receive sanctions relief in 2 months. That deadline is July 8th. And as we all know, they've been launching kinetic attacks in the Persian Gulf. And so I would expect Iran to continue to launch increasingly escalatory attacks if we don't respond. That's the risk that we would run. But again, we don't want to draw ourselves and Iran into a war that neither of us wants.
Dan, here it is in real time from the West Wing, okay? There's 4 tweets here. I'll read them off the air. President Obama made a desperate and terrible deal with Iran, gave them $150 billion plus $1.8 billion in cash. Iran was in big trouble, and he bailed them out, gave them a free path to nuclear weapons, and soon, instead of saying thank you, Iran yelled death to America. I terminated the deal, which was not even ratified by Congress, and imposed strong sanctions. They are a much weakened nation today than at the beginning of my presidency when they were causing major problems throughout the Middle East. Now they are bust. On Monday, they shot down an unmanned drone flying in international waters. We were cocked and loaded to retaliate last night on 3 different sites when I asked, how many will die? 150 people, sir, was the answer from a general. 10 minutes before the strike, I stopped it, not proportionate to shooting down an unmanned drone. I am in no hurry. Our military is rebuilt, new and ready to go, by far the best in the world. Sanctions are biting and more added last night. Iran can never have nuclear weapons, never in all caps, not against the USA and not against the world. That from the president 1 moment ago. Dan, you react now to the clear position that this administration wants to prevent Iran from going nuclear.
Well, let's be clear that Iran struck one of our unmanned drones. They have not struck any of our U.S. ships. They have not targeted U.S. servicemen and women in the Gulf. And so the president felt like if he were to take an action which caused Iranian deaths, then we would be further escalating this engagement with Iran and drawing the risk of a war that, again, neither country wants. For Iran, let's make it clear, if they were to launch an all-out war, that would be regime suicide. I do believe the undercurrent in what the president is saying is there's an off-ramp here, but time's wasting. Iran can come back to the negotiating table. We can fix that flawed nuclear deal with the sunset clauses, Iran's sponsor of terrorism, as well as their ballistic missile capability. But again, I think time's running out. I think the president has made that clear.
It is clear that he wants to sit down with the leaders of that country. Do you see that happening?
Well, there's no indication that Iran is ready to do that just yet. They've certainly had every opportunity to do it. The sanctions are crippling their economy and causing them to make some decisions about where to put their money, whether to invest it internally, domestically, or to pay for their proxy militias like Lebanese Hezbollah and the Houthis in Yemen, not to mention proxy militias in Iraq. So this is a challenge for Iran. They don't quite seem to have reached the tipping point, however, where they're ready to negotiate with the U.S., and that's why where we're at right now is so dangerous.
Terrific analysis. Thank you, Dan. Dan Hoffman with us here today, and we'll come back a bit later today when there is more news on that.